Emotions. If only I didn't have to feel. Hey there. This is D and welcome to Uneven. It is 4:17 a.m. I just recorded a previous episode of the podcast. I am still here on a relatively sleepless night. Woke up about 12:30 with a thought in my head. Couldn't let it go. Why? Because of the emotions that were tied to it. And it got me thinking. One of the things I think about a lot lately has been kind of the whole debate of reason and emotion. I think that's an interesting topic because, let's just get the obligatories out of the way, which is we need both. We need both. I mean, there's no way emotion is beautiful and wonderful and passionate, and it includes love and beauty and excitement and sexuality and all those wonderful things, and it also includes hate and anger and depression and worry and fear. It's all those things. Emotions are what make us human. Without them, we're computers. Hell, computers are starting to develop emotions too, so that may no longer be valid. But without them, we're not human. Reason, on the other side, is the logic. It's the computer. It's the looking at all the factors and trying to decide the right answer based on facts. And it is great. And it also is flawed. Humans have both. We have reason. We have the ability to reason, think through things, do things rationally. And we have this emotion that can drive us to the greatest creations that the world has ever seen, and also drive us down to the deepest depths where hope seems lost eternally. This morning, one of the things I was pulled up YouTube right after I got off, woke up, had that ruminating thought, and so I opened up my iPad and went to my addiction, which is YouTube. It's, again, one I'm trying to break and reduce, but since I've been home and had to deal with new losses and other stuff like that, I've gotten caught back up in it again anyway. But on there, one of the ones that popped up was a Buddhist one on being emotionless. And it's so interesting because, first of all, I'm not a Buddhist, but I did find a lot of the Buddhist teachings actually very helpful when I was coming off of benzodiazepines. And it was very helpful to me because it just helped me get a mindset to process through what I was going through. I am, for those who don't know me, and you might go back and listen to some of the stuff about me, but I'm kind of all over the map. I was raised Christian, spiritually. I still have a faith in, I think, a higher power, although it fluctuates and it's not well defined. But I do find guidance in many places, and I like that. I like being able to pick, the things that I think I value from different places. And one of the places that got me through coming off of the benzodiazepine drugs, and those first few years especially that were so incredibly difficult for me, was Buddhism, because it helped me create a mindset that helped me to process it. I haven't done as much of that lately, but that's where this mindfulness thing comes in, and some of this lack of emotion, or being emotionless. And what I liked is their approach to that, because it's not a being emotionless, even though it's kind of the way it looks. That's not really what it's about from the Buddhist perspective. It's about noticing the emotions, accepting the emotions as they are, but not letting them overtake you. You know what I'm saying? Not letting them control you, not letting them be everything. Instead, noticing emotions and, like a cloud, letting them pass. It would have been this morning when I had that thought about work that got me all kind of worked up. And to have that thought, experience the thought, experience that emotion, and then just let it pass. It's someplace I think all of us would like to be, especially with negative emotions, where we can just let that pass. And I think that's a good thing. And then there's the reason side of thing, which is, okay, and I can approach that thought too by saying, well, this probably didn't happen. I don't know all the details. And really, there's no reason to react now. The best thing to do is to sit back, don't say anything, see what happens, see how this plays out. My emotions, of course, are fighting that constantly. Say, no, I need to know what happened. I need to know what's going on. I need to know. And my reason is going, no, you don't. Just hang on there. It's all going to work itself out in the end. It's all going to be okay in the end. And it always is. I mean, it always ends up some way in the end. But one of the things I see is like, when does reason make sense and when does emotion make sense? I know a lot of people want to just get rid of emotion because it can create some of the greatest suffering in the world. Absolutely. Emotions can do that. I've been through that. Horrible things. Had some terrible things I've experienced. But it also can be some of the most wonderful things. And the truth is, you can't have one without the other. You can't have one without the other. That's from a song. It's from a famous song that also was the theme song for an old comedy TV show. Can you think of that one? If you do, put it in the comments. I'm just curious to find out. I like that, yeah. I'm old school in so many things, and I know it. And I'm not saying it's the right thing. I just am old school in TV. I'm old school in movies. That's just where I'm at most of the time. So I'm going to pull those sometimes, and that's what I'm going to do. But I think this is one of those things where we couldn't live always in this blissful state. I mean, maybe bliss is achievable for somebody, but I think bliss isn't about not having negative emotions. That's not what bliss is. I don't think that's the state we want to get to. That's not nirvana. That's not heaven. That's not what it is. I mean, we have to have fluctuations. I truly believe this. Those high highs mean nothing if you didn't have some lows. Can you imagine being at the excitement level of like sexual excitement 24/7? Well, I think we would die after about a day. That's just too much to take. It's too much to handle. Or just to be in this pure joy all the time. I'd be bored out of my mind. It's these lows and highs and that fluctuation that makes us human, that makes it life. Yeah, we'd all love to get rid of the suffering of the negativity and the lows. But if we did, we'd have to get rid of the highs. I truly believe that. They fit together. They're together. Reason, pure logic, is the absence of that emotion. Are there people that are like that? Are there people that are kind of like that? Almost, some of those people we call psychopaths, but there are people like that who have less emotion than others. In my marriage, I am the more emotional one. My wife is less emotional. Now, it varies sometimes on different things, but I am definitely a more emotional person. And she's less emotional. We had friends over not too long ago, and the husband and wife. And it was the opposite. She was the more emotional one, and he was the more rational, the more reasoning one. So people, we do vary on that spectrum. And I think there are times when one is better than the other. I think emotion is what creates the human experience. Emotion, I think, is like this layer that, God or evolution, however you want to look at it, placed on top of our reasoning brains to say, oh yeah, let's give them an experience. Let's give them some highs. Let's give them some lows. Let's let them really experience this whole journey they're on, and have that. And that's the story. That's the passion, the story of it. That's the life. That's the guts of it. That's what makes us human. And I thank God it's there. I thank God it's there. But emotions are rarely, well, not rarely, emotions are not facts. Emotions are biased. Emotions are perspectives. Emotions are opinions. They're not facts. And we can get caught in thinking of emotions as facts. That's when reason comes in. Reason allows us to look into things, hopefully without emotion or with less emotion, and evaluate things. And I always go back to reason is where I want to make the long-term decisions of my life. Reasons where I think the government should be. Reasons are where, I think the engineers, the people who are building things should be. This is where that thinking, because that's the logic of it. That's the math of it. This is where the science comes in. This is where, we evaluate all the different things, find what's the best thing based on the data. That's the computer programmer in me. I was a database programmer for 25 years. Still do database projects. Just got done still building a database to help manage this podcast. I'm still designing that, doing some tweaks on it. But that's what I get the kick out of doing, which is getting the kick out of it is the emotion piece. But that's where I get to do logic and I get to do reason. And I really, it's funny, I really enjoy the reason, but then that's adding emotion to the reason. So that's confusing. But reason is good because that's how I think we need to determine long-term plans. I really believe that. I think that's where the long-term plan should come from, is more reason with a spattering, with a little flavor of emotion on it, because paying attention to how your emotions might be can influence that decision, but the decision should still be a reasoning decision. But then the emotions, they'll make the experience of all that so much more vibrant and alive. A perfect example is, I'm looking at RVs, thinking one day I want to buy an RV because I love to road trip. That I love to road trip and drive around and do all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking, would it be great to have like a van camper, one of the vans for van life, that kind of stuff. That's where you can sleep and stuff, or even a small Class C, which are the ones that are just vans, a little bigger than a van, a little bit wider, to do this kind of stuff and then travel around. And I'll have a place I can sleep and hit the bathroom and shower and stuff if I need to. But I thought it'd be kind of fun. It's like, well, so the logic of buying that. Well, I watch these videos and I watch people doing it and it looks wonderful. And I'm thinking, let's just do that. I just want to go buy one right now and, we'll borrow the money and, all this kind of stuff because I'm going to make this work. It's awesome. That's the emotion. That's my emotion. And I get caught up on that. I thank God for my wife because she's usually the calming voice when I do that. But I just go right out, I'll buy one because I want to, and that's the emotion. That's pure emotion wanting that. Thankfully, I also have a reason voice in there somewhere. And the reason voice says, okay, let's do that, but let's wait a little bit and learn a few things first. And my reason voice says that because it knows if I back off a while, take some time, watch more videos and learn more about RVing, and including some of the negative aspects of RVing, and look at the cost ROI ratios and how much loss you take on things. And once that information seeps in over time, that my excitement might come down a little bit, and it does. And it does. And for that long-term decision, the right decision in my mind was that reasoning one, the rational one. I'm not saying I won't get an RV one time. I still might, but maybe in a couple years, and maybe I'll buy a used one and kind of start easier. Maybe we'll, rent one for a while or whatever. We'll just kind of work our way into it. But that's one of those bigger decisions, long-term decisions, that the reasoning side of my brain needed to be the one to make the choice. But so often I want that emotional side to do it. And I do. And the emotional side will kick in. And I have made those decisions using the emotional side. I bought my very first sports car based entirely out of the emotional side of my brain. And after a year and a half into its purchase, I sold it because I couldn't afford to keep the car. We've all done that. We've all done things like that. But I think it's interesting that we get into a debate in society about reasoning and emotion and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's so funny because it's like nature versus nurture. It's almost never one or the other. It's usually both. And we need both. We need that emotion. We need the feelings. And sometimes that feeling tells you something the logic may not see. But in the end, I think we need to make those long-term decisions with the reasoning. But having all just that is also boring. I don't really know what the topic of this was about, except emotions and reason. And I'm just kind of rambling on, but I think it's interesting. And I think it's something to look within ourselves and see when we're all caught up in an emotion. To be able to see that as an emotion, as a feeling, to even appreciate it as this sensation. But not to get too caught up into it, and instead to let it pass. And then when we need to make the decisions, we can use that reasoning side of our brain and let that kick in. We can let the left brain kick in and make the decision, even though the right brain wants to have control, loves to have, needs to have control because it's the passion, it's the emotion. Let the left brain kick in more often with things that really matter. Yeah, if you're just trying to decide whether or not to go and grab that, pint of Ben and Jerry's, and down it, maybe once, every other month or something, you let the emotions run wild and have fun. But if you start doing that, of course, every day, it's gonna, have a negative effect long term. I don't really know. But I can see back to that Buddhism thing, that why being emotionless, it's not the right term. It's not being emotionless. It's separating ourselves from our emotions. And that's something I got to a point where I could kind of start to do when I was first coming off those drugs, off benzodiazepines, and I lost it again, and now I'm trying to kind of find it back again, because I think we can let the emotions take over enough so that we can hit some pretty dark places, especially when those negative emotions really kick in. And our logic brain, our reasoning can't always dig us out of that. And so I think finding a way to experience the emotions, because I don't want to knock them out. You don't want to get rid of emotions. Are wonderful. Even the negative ones, I've done a lot of crying lately because I've lost so many people. But I've started to even enjoy that cry sometimes, that emotional release. I mentioned that on the road trip. on the Florida road trip coming back on that series about that emotional release. And that there's actually a good feeling in that emotional release sometimes. It's weird to have that blend of so much negativity and sadness, but then there's also this just release and the calm and the relief and the, not joy, but just contentment that comes from letting that out. So powerful. We are creatures of reason and emotion blended together. And that's what makes it so wonderful. If we can find a way to let the emotions experience them and then let them pass. And let the reason come in when it's needed to make the serious decisions to help us with influence from the emotion. So that we can get through some of the hard times and not let that powerful feelings overtake us. I think that's a good thing. Right now, actually, I am trying to find a way to really wrap this up to make it very meaningful and poignant. And I'm not coming up with it. So that's why the delay and the guffaws, I'm going, and I'm thinking of, how do I tie this up? Because I know when I turn this off, here we go. I know when I stop the recorder, I always then have a feeling about what I just recorded. And sometimes that feeling is, oh, I feel good about that. I can't wait to go review that, edit it, and get it posted. And sometimes that feeling is, well, that didn't work. And I don't like the ones where I turn it off and then I have that feeling, well, that didn't work. I'd rather have it be, oh, that was really good. I think that was a good one. I think people are going to like it. And again, I shouldn't let external approval dictate what I do. And I'm trying really hard on this podcast not to do that. But I still want to create good content because I want that content. I want these to be good. So I want to have that tie-in, that summation at the end of these podcasts that really just bring it all together and say, this is this and this is what we should do going forward, even though I really don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but you're listening to me and I love that and I thank you for it. But I think it's something related to this. Don't let emotions rule your life. There are methods, there are techniques, there are 1,000 different tools you can use to help separate yourself a bit from your emotions, still experience them, still get the joy and the pain out of them, but without letting them take over your life. And instead, experiencing them and letting them pass. And letting that reasoning side, that right side of the brain, no, reasoning is left side. Reasoning's left side. And letting that reasoning side of our personalities, of our minds, kick in and say, hey, this was just an emotion. It's okay. It will pass. Now, let's go get some ice cream. I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, this is Dee. Thank you so much for stopping by and checking out our podcast. I do need to remind everyone that this podcast is for informational purposes only and should never be considered medical, psychological, or professional health advice of any kind. If you or someone you know is dealing with significant mental health issues, please seek professional help. Resources can be found in our show notes and on our website at unevenpodcast.com. Take care of yourself, and I'll catch you on the flip side.